I'm Cindy Van Landingham, Bosque County Judge, and you're listening to Texas County Voice, a podcast for all 254 counties.
Welcome to Texas County Voice. I'm Jody Seaburn with the Texas Association of Counties. Today we're taking a closer look at the 89th Texas Legislature, what happened, what didn't, and what counties need to prepare for next. Joining me is Caroline Love, Director of Legislative Services at TAC. Our Legislative Services team spent countless hours keeping a close eye on legislation affecting counties. Caroline, welcome back to Texas County Voice.
Thanks, Jody. It's always great to be here. And I'll be honest, when the session wrapped on June 2nd, I think the word a lot of us used was relief. Not celebration, not disappointment, just relief, because some of the most concerning bills didn't make it, and we did get a few key wins across the finish line.
Well, let's start there. Give us a broad overview. How busy was this session?
It was very busy. Lawmakers filed more than 8,700 bills. That's the most in over 30 years. But they only passed just under 14% of them, which is actually the lowest pass rate we've seen in decades. The upside is that many concerning bills didn't make it through. The downside is that it was still a heavy lift for counties to monitor all that activity.
Yeah, and Governor Abbott, the veto period ended June 22nd. Governor Abbott signed 1,100 bills into law.
That's correct. He signed 1,155 bills, to be exact. He vetoed 28 bills and allowed 30 bills to become law without his signature. All 7 of his emergency items passed, including bail reform, water infrastructure funding, property tax relief, and the creation of a new Texas Cyber Command Center.
Yeah, I've heard from a few county officials who have described this session as one of, I think the best way to put it is measured success. What are some examples?
I think House Bill 1109 is a great one. That exempts counties from paying the state's motor fuels tax, which will save tens of thousands of dollars annually. It's a real impact on county budgets and can even help in providing some property tax relief to constituents as well. Plus, the passage of House Bill 3000, which creates a grant program that helps rural counties purchase ambulances, a huge win by the County Judges and Commissioners Association.
Yeah, that may have been the top priority of the County Judges and Commissioners Association this session. The rural ambulance program. I know they put a lot of effort into that. Mm-hmm. And on the budget side, the legislature, which the budget is the only thing the legislature is constitutionally obligated to pass each session, they passed a $338 billion two-year budget, so covering the fiscal years 2026-27. What are just a few things in the budget that stood out for counties?
There were some great opportunities in there for counties, including $90 million for that rural ambulance program that we just mentioned. There's also $20 million dedicated to support sheriffs, partnering with the U.S. Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement Agency. Roughly $170 million is dedicated for indigent defense, though that only covers about 10% of counties' actual cost to administer that program. So there is work to be done there. I'll also mention $175 million was approved for the Department of Motor Vehicles budget, which will help reform the registration and title system used by all counties to register and title our vehicles. So that'll be a great win for counties in that regard.
Well, one bill that sort of flew under the radar until the very end, and that was Senate Bill 2753, which changes early voting. You want to talk about that one a little bit? Because I think that for our county election officials, they're looking at some pretty substantial changes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that bill may have, as you said, flown under the radar is a lot of those changes, especially to the early voting period, were made later through in the process through the committee work that was being done, which it happens frequently, as we know, with bills as they work their way from filing to the governor's desk. But Senate Bill 2753 really restructures that early voting time. It removes the gap between early voting and election day, so it'll be more of a continuous 12-day voting period there.
I think it was either you or someone else, Caroline, that I heard describe the implementation of 2753 may be a little wonky.
Yeah, it has a very unusual effective date. It goes into effect on September 1st of this year. However, there is a component that says the Secretary of State must develop a work group, including counties and other stakeholders, to work through how this early voting transitioning into the voting day period will look, and making sure that it's not overly cumbersome on counties for implementation. So there is time for that work to be done and refine the requirements before it goes into effect, which can be no later than August of 2027.
And that continuous 12-day voting period will now include 2 full weekends, so presumably that will boost turnout.
Presumably.
Or theoretically, theoretically, whichever one is accurate. Any funding from the state to help counties implement 2753?
Unfortunately, no. But with that delayed implementation, I do believe there may be an opportunity to identify costs associated with that. And maybe when the legislature returns in 2027, we can work with them on finding ways to help make that easier for counties.
Generally, the county perspective on the regular session was overall a fairly positive session for counties, but there were a few close calls, bills that almost passed but would have caused problems for counties. You want to talk about one or two of those?
Absolutely. Yeah, Senate Bill 2858 is one that stands out that would have given the state broad authority over local decisions and allowed private citizens to sue counties over compliance, especially as it relates to development. That one came pretty close to passing. And of course, there was Senate Bill 19, which is that ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying. And while it didn't pass, we definitely expect to see that come up again. Additionally, Senate Bill 76 would have ended countywide polling. That program is something that counties have embraced around the state and makes it a lot easier for people to vote. But that bill did not make it very far at all, but I think we may see it in the future as well.
Yeah, that's why we sort of mentioned these bills that didn't pass is at the legislature. Bills that failed to pass one session have a habit of coming back the next.
Yes, I've often heard people say, especially when you're looking at a significant change to current programs, you have to plan for at least 2 sessions for that, all the stakeholders to kind of come forward, work through any issues, and get to a common ground where people are better with how that bill is going forward.
Well, I think there was some hope when the regular session ended that there would not be a special session, that unlike, I think 7 of the past 10 regular sessions have been followed by special sessions, but that this time would be an exception to that new norm. But alas, that's not the case. Governor Abbott, after the veto period ended June 22nd, he immediately called a special session to begin July 21st. What's on the agenda?
Yeah, so it's interesting because approximately a month ago, people said they had heard the governor indicate that he didn't see a need for a special session, but we never hold our breath on anything like that. And the end of the veto period proved that there may be a need to bring legislators back. The biggest one is Senate Bill 3, which I think, unless you're living under a rock, you've probably heard about it. There was a desire to ban all THC products. That is how the bill passed the House and the Senate. But in the very final hour, the governor had until midnight on June 22nd to make a decision, and probably 30 to 40 minutes prior to that, he issued the veto statement on that bill. And so he feels the legislature has the opportunity to regulate those products instead of ban them. So that's kind of the biggest one that's in play. He had a few other bills that he vetoed that he said the legislature could likely come back in and tweak them, but they were not quite as broad in their impact as SB 3. Of particular interest, Senate Bill 648 was a bill that really was looking to hone in on title theft and deed fraud at the county level. But the governor in his veto mentioned he felt that the steps that someone would have to go through to prove such fraud or theft might be too burdensome on some especially those who may not have the resources to hire professionals to help them with that process. So that's a bill that's included on this initial call for a special session. Additionally, Senate Bill 2878 is a bill that was making what they call omnibus changes to the judicial system. And even as the governor noted, many times those bills are just codifying certain practices and do not have policy implications. However, there was a component in that bill relating to the expunction of criminal records if intervention has taken place prior to the time that someone has that opportunity for further judgment on what action needs to be taken for those crimes to be excused, and he thought that might have broader policy implications that need to be revisited.
And his call for a special session, the initial list of agenda items, that might grow. There's expectation that list might grow to include redistricting.
That's correct. Yes, there seems to have been some pressure from Washington, D.C., we'll say, to consider redrawing some congressional maps. And so, we don't know what all will be included on that special session agenda until the governor issues his official proclamation. And that can occur at any time up until July 21st. So we'll be watching for that.
Well, one thing, if redistricting is included, that will be a big battle.
For sure.
And in the meantime, looking ahead a few months, voters will have the opportunity to weigh in on 17 proposed constitutional amendments that the legislature passed and put on the November ballot. That's the most since 2003.
That's right. And there's a lot to consider there, everything from property tax exemptions to Senate Joint Resolution 5 that would improve bail reform, and counties will be paying very close attention to all of those amendments.
So we know there's at least one special session coming. Beyond whatever additional special sessions happen, what are some of the big issues counties should watch for before the next regular session in January 2027?
Tax policy is a big one. The governor has floated requiring a 2/3 supermajority vote of constituents for any local tax increase. That would be a major shift in how counties fund essential services. Also, implementation of the election law changes, rulemaking tied to major legislation, and whatever comes out of this special session, all of that will shape the next 18 months.
Well, part of that conversation will happen here in Austin in late August at Tax 2025 Legislative Conference. What can attendees expect?
It's our chance to debrief on the 89th session and prepare for what's ahead. We'll cover everything from that Senate Bill 2753 and election administration that we talked about to how the new Texas Cyber Command Center can coordinate with counties. There will be a session on bail reform, and we'll also be looking at grant opportunities for counties.
And the keynote speaker is former U.S. Representative Kent Hance, who was also at one time the Texas Tech Chancellor.
That's correct. He has his own podcast. Hopefully, it's not too much of a competitor with ours, but he is known as the best storyteller in Texas. We are very much looking forward to having him at the conference.
Well, Caroline, before we wrap, what is your biggest takeaway from the 89th Legislature? Or I should say the regular session of the 89th Legislature, because we're not quite done yet.
That is very true. It did seem a little quieter than expected, and that is a good thing. Counties had some real wins and avoided some serious setbacks, but the big fights over local control, preemption, taxation, those aren't over. Counties will have to stay engaged, and now is the time to have those conversations locally to help us as we head into the next legislative session.
Well, thank you, Caroline. And one more reminder, the TAC Legislative Conference is August 27th through the 29th in Austin. You can view the full agenda and register, if you haven't already, at county.org/LegConference. Caroline, thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Texas County Voice is a production of the Texas Association of Counties. Learn more about the Texas Association of Counties and Texas counties at county.org.